Good day, everybody. I'm glad you could catch me here on YouTube. And where I need you to go in your study guide is to page 44, where it says language written / oral denotative connotative jargon analogies. Now, the first thing I'm going to do, forgive me for going off camera, is I'm going to give you a quick overview of language, and don't bother about writing anything yet. I'll let you know when you need to start writing things. But in terms of language, we're going to talk about language as it relates to public speaking specifically. And again, don't worry about writing anything yet. Written versus oral language, denotative versus connotative language, the importance of context, and that's going to be a very important word, very important concept to go over, and jargon. So written versus oral language, denotative versus connotative, the importance of context and jargon. And analogies will be the last thing we talk about. One of the things, again, don't worry about writing anything yet. Too often, sometimes speeches sound like somebody reading right out of a textbook. And that's not very easy on the ear. It's very uncomfortable to listen to. And the way things are written for a book and the way things are written for the ear are actually somewhat different. And sometimes, particularly since you've been taught to write for so many years, there's a tendency a lot of times for students to want to do a speech, an informative speech, that sounds exactly like an essay. And what I want you to do, want you to learn, is how to put together a speech that does not sound like an essay. So we're going to look at the differences between written versus oral language. And in your study guide, forgive me for going off camera here, in your study guide it will be on page 44, kind of halfway down, what are the differences between oral and written communication? And in terms of the differences, excuse me, here are things you have to know. First of all, oral language is less formal. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to use improper English or improper grammar. I'll explain to you, give you more information about what I mean by less formal. More words, redundancy. That's the second thing. Now, this is where the textbook and I somewhat disagree. In your textbook, it says, more often than not, when we speak, when we use oral communication, it requires fewer words than when we write. However, a lot of times, if we're trying to explain something using oral communication, it requires more words, so there's more redundancy. And it connects with what the audience already understands. When we receive new information, what our brains do is it takes that information and refers it to what we already know. And if we already have a background of knowledge, that helps a lot. If we don't, then we're in a lot of trouble. For example, if I said, the other day my brother Bob, for the 4th of July, dressed up like the American flag. Now, I know what the American flag looks like. I've seen it many times. I know exactly what it looks like, red, white, and blue. I don't need to see what the American flag looks like, and it looks like that, to understand kind of the way Bob probably looks. And my guess is, if somebody said to me, Bob looks like the American flag, he's dressed up like Uncle Sam. You know, red and white striped pants, maybe a blue jacket with white stars on it, and the top hat that is red, white, and blue. On the other hand, if somebody said, Mary the other day dressed up like the flag of Luxembourg, I'm in trouble. because I don't know what the flag of Luxembourg looks like, so I have nothing to compare it to. So at this point, you may not be quite understanding where I'm getting at here, and this is confusing, and it's very understandable of why it is confusing. But I will explain in more depth and detail and give you specific examples to explain the differences between oral and written communication. Let me go back here and explain what I mean by being less formal, what I mean by more words and more redundancy, and connecting with what the audience already knows and understands. So I will explain this by giving you some very clear and specific examples. Now, the next part is we're going to look at the difference between denotative versus connotative language. And where you need to be in the study guide is just below where it says the difference between oral and written communication. What is the difference between denotative and connotative language? And this is something you may already know, but denotative language is the objective dictionary meaning. If I just wrote, I saw 25,000 people gathered to listen to the speech in the city square. 25,000 people is 25,000 people. A city square is a city square. For example, if I hold this up and go, this is a stopwatch. It is what it is. This is a screen. You're watching a PowerPoint presentation. I'm taking this with, a flip camera. I'm wearing a plaid shirt. Very objective. Connotative is subjective, emotionally charged. For example, a large angry mob moved like a tidal wave toward the city square to hear the speech. By the very nature, I use the term, for example, angry mob, and I don't even necessarily need the word angry. The word mob connotes the fact that this is not a happy group of people. You don't consider a happy, well-adjusted group of people a mob. And so if I were referring to my political supporters, I might say, well, they were a bunch of, energetic, enthusiastic people who went to listen to the speech. If they are the words of my opponent, I might call them a mob. And therefore, it would sound different. Because this is an informative speech, and because I want you to be as objective as possible, I would prefer objective dictionary meaning kind of language. Now, I know it's not exactly easy to be 100% objective, but quite honestly, when Jeannie referred to Mickey Mouse as our beloved rodent friend, or she said that Disney theme parks were the best in the world, those are the type of things I would kind of hope you would avoid in terms of the type of language that you're using to make it as objective as possible. Now, the next step in understanding language is that even denotative language, even objective language can be problematic, can be difficult in terms of understanding or clarity. So this is the end of part one, and now I will now proceed on to part two, talking about how denotative language can be confusing and how to make certain that you clarify it.